Brazil's federal prosecutors are to open an investigation into the surge in deforestation and wildfires in the Amazon. All this as world concern grows for the fate of the Amazon rainforest.
The Amazon is the lungs of the world, and it's going up in smoke. There's been a surge of forest fires this year, an increase of 83% on last year. This NASA satellite image shows all of the fires burning over the last 24 hours. And this shows them along with those from the last 72 hours. And finally, everywhere that has been burning in the space of only 1 week. Environmentalists say this is due to rampant deforestation, which has been encouraged by Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro to promote agriculture and boost the economy. On Thursday, Bolsonaro said that the government was investigating the fires, but lacks the resources to properly fight them. He also added to earlier comments saying that environmental NGOs had deliberately set the fires out of anger after he cut their funding.
Everyone is a suspect, but the biggest are the NGOs. Did I accuse NGOs directly? I just said I suspect them. I'm not looking for who is responsible for what's happening in Brazil.
On August 19th, the skies over Brazil's largest city, Sao Paulo, turned dark as the wind blew smoke there from wildfires over 2,700 kilometers away. Experts agree that the situation is drastic.
It is a situation that I consider a crime against the homeland and a crime against humanity, because throughout the history of Brazil, we have had difficult situations. But this is the first time we have a situation almost encouraged by the government.
The Amazon is a vital store of carbon that is seen as the last buffer against climate change. The World Wildlife Fund says that almost 20% of the Amazon forest has disappeared in the last half-century, and this is only accelerating.
70,000 wildfires in the Amazon rainforest identified via satellites in space for the Brazilian Space Service there.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. This year has been the year in which the climate crisis has made itself the most ferociously known. Of course, that was true last year and the year before that, and 2020 will almost certainly be worse. But this year, we've already showed you this footage of Greenland melting in front of our eyes. We've shown you the fires in Siberia, in the Arctic, where the underlying peat is burning. And these are the images that are capturing people's imagination right now. Rightly. Much of the Amazon is on fire. Here is the smoke hovering over Brazil's largest city, Sao Paulo, which is 2,000 miles from many of the fires. Here's satellite images of the fires themselves. I have to say, I almost didn't want to put this on television because I find it so paralyzingly terrible. It gives me the same feeling in the pit of my gut when I'm watching the Chernobyl miniseries. The reason why this is so particularly horrifying, these images you're seeing of the Amazon, is that not only are the fires releasing carbon in the atmosphere, they're getting rid of what people have called the lungs of the planet. The single biggest repository of natural life that takes carbon out of the air, that does the thing we need more of, is the Amazon. It's home to at least 10% of the world's entire biodiversity, and we need it. We've always needed the Amazon, but at no time do we need the Amazon more than the period now where we need to be taking carbon out of the air. And instead, what you're watching on your screen is the machinery for taking carbon out of the air being turned into carbon and put into the air. It's as bad as it gets. But the important thing to understand, and the reason that we're showing you these images, the ones you're seeing on your screen, is that this is not just some natural thing that just happened. It is, in many ways, the product of politics, of right-wing politics, of a right-wing movement dedicated to climate denialism and climate destruction, just like the right-wing movement we have right here in the U.S. In Brazil, this guy, Donald Trump's buddy, Jair Bolsonaro, is the president. He is a man who critics have called a fascist, a man who's joked about he would not deign to rape an opposition member of parliament because she is, quote, not worthy of it, who's thrown around all sorts of anti-gay slurs, who's praised Brazil's history of military dictatorships, who's threatened the revocation of civil liberties, and who ran explicitly on a platform of no more of these namby-pamby environmental regulations. Open up the Amazon. Let the agro industry of Brazil get into the Amazon and start cutting. This is what he had to say about Brazil's part of the Amazon. Quote, Brazil is a virgin that every pervert from the outside wants, implying Brazilians should cut it down before others have the chance. He actually fired the head of the agency that tracks deforestation. He disputed the data from that agency that shows the rise in deforestation in his own administration. Since coming to office, he has delivered on his promise. He has opened up the Amazon. The images you see on your screen are partly a result of that. Huge swaths of the Amazon are on fire. All of which is to say, what is producing the fires is politics. What is producing the climate crisis is politics. And what will produce the solution to the climate crisis is also politics. Which brings us to our own country. We have our own right-wing movement of denialism that has done everything in its power to make the climate crisis worse. And unfortunately, only one of the two parties really in this country has committed, and now with increasing boldness and vision and urgency, to solutions on the scale necessary to reverse the crisis. Yesterday, climate-focused candidate Jay Inslee dropped out of the presidential race, although in some ways he was, I think, the victim of his own success. He put out a plan which Greenpeace has called the gold standard for dealing with the climate emergency, but partly because I think of his presence, many of the other Democratic candidates for president have produced really quite ambitious climate plans, like Beto O'Rourke and Senator Elizabeth Warren, and even the frontrunner Joe Biden. Today, Senator Bernie Sanders unveiled a plan of his own, a Green New Deal, a $16 trillion plan on how to fight climate change. Joining me now, Democratic presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont. Senator, it's a long plan. It's like, it's pages and pages, and I read it today. And the biggest thing I was taken by is the sheer ambition. It is enormous in scope for what it imagines.
Well, Chris, this is the way I look at it. You can approach climate change the way Donald Trump does, call it a hoax, deny the reality. And that is obviously an incredible danger for the planet. Or you could say, well, climate change is real, but we can't do all that much. We can't really disrupt the economy. We can't do that. We can't do that. We got to look at it from a political point of view. Or the third approach, which I have tried to take here, is to say, look, the scientific community tells us we have a handful of years in which we must act boldly and transformatively to move away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Or else the planet we will be leaving for our children and future generations will be a planet that is increasingly unhealthy and uninhabitable. Man, I just came from Paradise, California, and you remember the tragedy there. Unbelievable, unbelievable. Looked like a bomb was dropped in that community. So if we believe, Chris, that climate change is real, if we believe what the scientists are telling us, we have got to be bold, we have got to be comprehensive, we have got to be aggressive. That is what that plan is about.
I want to talk about one part of the plan that I find fascinating, which is about how power is generated and distributed. You talk about there's some federal public administration of power in this country based on the Tennessee Valley Authority and others. Basically you propose essentially a federal takeover of the whole thing, that essentially a Tennessee Valley Authority extension for the whole country, right? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, you're in the ballpark. That's right. Look, the TVA has done a lot of good work. It produces electricity from hydropower and other sources. What we need to do is have an aggressive federal government saying that we are going to produce a massive amount of electricity from solar and from wind and from other sustainable energies, and we will sell it out. And by the way, we're going to make money doing that. But you can't nibble around the edges anymore. We need to transform our energy system. That means a massive increase in sustainable energy.
So I think people that watch the program know that I'm not exactly a deficit hawk. I'm not I think America's a very wealthy country. It can afford a lot of big investments. But this is really large. I mean, the amount of money we're talking about, you're talking about in the plan replacing every old diesel school bus, which is a really good idea from a climate perspective, replacing old mobile homes in the country, right? It's big and comprehensive. When people say to you, how do you pay for it? Is this a thing that America can afford? You say what?
Well, the first thing is we cannot not afford it. I mean, we are playing for the future of the planet. So we have got to do it. And second of all, we pay for this in a number of ways. And one of the ways we pay for it is, as you have just described, a massive federal project that produces sustainable energy is going to make money as well. Furthermore, we do away with the tax breaks and the subsidies that the fossil fuel industry now receives, which in fact is massive. Thirdly, we create 20 million new jobs as we transform our energy system and improve our infrastructure, and those are going to be good-paying union jobs, and those folks are going to be paying taxes. Fourthly, for a variety of reasons, we've got to cut military spending. Fifthly, we do away with Trump's huge tax breaks for the rich. And sixth, we have a progressive tax system which demands large corporations and the rich stop paying their fair share of taxes.
So on the job creation front, that the 20 million job number jumped out at me. And at first I thought, well, this is implausible just even within the plan. But the plan, when you're talking about like replacing every diesel school bus in America, which is what the plan calls for, that's a lot of jobs. What is your... To me, there's a mismatch between the promises and the reality that makes these things hard, right? There are coal workers right now out of work in Wyoming. There are coal workers who are stationed, I think, in Harlan County, Kentucky, not getting their pensions, not letting that coal move because they've been screwed time and time again. What do you say to them when they say, why should I believe that the promise you're making can be a reality?
Well, one of the things that we do, and we put many, many tens of billions of dollars into a just transition program, which says to those coal miners and the men and women who work on the oil rigs, you are not our enemy. You're working to feed your family. I am perhaps the strongest pro-union, pro-worker member of the Congress. Those people are not my enemy. What is my enemy is climate change. And we have a very, very strong approach to make sure that those workers get trained for new jobs, they get the health care that they need, they get the educational opportunities that they need. But the bottom line of all of this, Chris, is either we believe in what the scientists are telling us or we do not. And if we believe what they are telling us is that we got fewer than 12 years in order to transform our energy system, or else there will be irreparable damage done to our country and the planet. Well, if that is the reality, and I happen to believe the scientists, then we have to act comprehensively. Last point that I want to make on this, Chris, this is not just an American issue. And what is so very dangerous about Trump is that we need a president who is leading the world. That's hard. That is really hard. If you think what I'm talking about for our country is difficult, try getting Russia and China and India, all these other countries involved. And what I have been saying, and I know that this is not going to happen tomorrow, but maybe, just maybe, in the midst of this crisis, maybe the countries of the world wake up and understand that instead of spending $1.5 trillion every year on weapons of destruction designed to kill each other, maybe we pool our resources together and we combat our common enemy, which is climate change.
You know, you raise the international stakes, and of course the U.S. is somewhere around 30% of the world emissions, even if we do everything right and China and India emit, and as Africa develops, right, and it begins emitting more, we're all in a lot of trouble. I want to ask this question, because you gave a speech once about the rise of the far populist right across the world. And I think Bolsonaro in Brazil is an example of that. Do you see a connection essentially between that movement and the climate battle, like we are seeing play out in Brazil?
I do. I mean, I think you have right-wing extremists like Bolsonaro and like Trump who are appealing to working class people and say, see all these wealthy environmentalists, they don't care about you. They're talking about some nonsense which isn't applicable to your lives. And that is why we need a kind of movement that brings working class people into it and says, we are on your side. And your kids and your grandchildren are going to need a planet which is habitable and healthy, but you are not going to be punished for what the fossil fuel industry is doing. We're going to protect your jobs. All
right. Senator Bernie Sanders, a really interesting plan. It is really ambitious in scope, and folks should definitely check it out. It's on the website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
For more on what is actually happening in the Amazon, I'm joined by Moira Burse. She's a finance campaign director for Amazon Watch, which is an advocacy group trying to protect the rainforest. Let me start with just the sort of top line as a group that works to protect the Amazon of why are these fires happening? Why is it so bad this year?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me and for bringing this really important issue to your audience attention. These fires actually appear to have been started by farmers who farm in areas of previously deforested Amazon. They apparently started these fires both to clear more land for agribusiness, but also as a sort of homage or a signal to Bolsonaro that they were hearing his calls to open the Amazon for business, that they were hearing his calls that the Amazon should be raised for for profit making. And so they were answering his call.
Wait, so this, I mean, the year-over-year data is crazy on this, right? Where this is a huge increase year-over-year. So what you're saying is that, like, this is the policy playing out. These are people taking the signal from Bolsonaro and setting the fires themselves to clear land. That is there's evidence of that?
Yeah, so several Brazilian news outlets have went to this region and interviewed these farmers, and they're quoted as saying that they did this to clear land for agribusiness and inspired by Bolsonaro and his rhetoric.
What are the stakes here for folks that are watching this? I think everyone viscerally is horrified. I think we all grew up hearing about the Amazon and deforestation. The first time I was in the Amazon and I saw a part that had been deforested and chopped down, I was like sort of blown away. How important is this from a climate perspective?
This is extremely important from a climate perspective. You referenced in your opening remarks the ways that rainforests and really dense tropical rainforests like the Amazon serve two climate protection purposes. They both absorb carbon when they are standing, and so the destruction, whether by logging or fires, eliminates that possibility of their carbon absorption. But also when they're cut down or burned, they release more carbon dioxide. All that carbon dioxide that they've been storing, they release that into the atmosphere. So it's a double whammy for the climate.
There's been a 77% increase from the same period in 2018, almost 40,000 fires. Two things from the president of Brazil. Bolsonaro has blamed the NGOs, and he hasn't specified which, but I imagine perhaps Amazon Watch is one of them, for what's happening. Do you have a response to that?
Well, as I said earlier, there's a clear admission from Bolsonaro supporters that they're the ones that started this. And I think it's really indicative of the kind of rhetoric that Bolsonaro uses. He himself has, from the day one of his campaign, made clear that he wants to see the Amazon burned down or torn down and opened up for mining and agribusiness. And so it's really just preposterous. And as you mentioned earlier, reminiscent of the kinds of flip-flopping that President Trump uses to hide the ridiculous remarks that he makes.
Are there things, final question, are there things the international community or people that are watching this right now and feeling that feeling of sort of like impotent sorrow can do?
Yes, definitely. And I really recognize that feeling of impotence. I'm feeling it myself. And our office has been flooded with phone calls and emails of people wanting to help and wanting to jump in airplanes and help put out the fires. And that's a really admirable and understandable feeling. Unfortunately, those of us here in the States and around the world, regular citizens or small NGOs like Amazon Watch, we can't go hop in a plane and put out fires, both logistically, but also because that's the responsibility of the Brazilian government. But there is a lot that we can do. The Bolsonaro administration right now has more or less carte blanche to continue with these policies of rolling back protections on the rainforest because agribusiness industry and its financiers are continuing to buy and continuing to invest in Amazon agribusiness and mining. Amazon Watch did research just this spring that traced those supply chains and traced the financial flows into the agribusiness industry in the Brazilian Amazon. And we need to be holding those companies accountable.
Amazon Watch is the organization where you can find that information more burst. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next.